When you have a science project, you have a hypothesis, independent variable, and dependent variable, right? Well, not always. As it turns out, there are two kinds of science projects that you can do for the IJAS expositions: experimental and design, and people often mix them up. So let's go into the differences between them. Experimental projects are what most people think of when they hear the word science project. The purpose of an experimental project is to establish the relationship between an independent variable, the variable that is modified by the experimenter, and the dependent variable, the variable that is affected as a result of the experiment. Before the data is taken, a hypothesis is written, which aims to predict the said relationship between the IV and the DV. After the data is taken, conclusions are drawn based on the data collected from the experiment. Design projects, on the other hand, do not have a hypothesis, nor an independent variable. The aim of these projects is to solve an issue by creating a solution and improving upon it using the engineering design process, pictured in the flowchart on the right. Instead of a hypothesis, one identifies a real world need, or problem that they are aiming to solve, and writes about it as their introduction. Instead of an IV, they have designs, which are the creations made to solve the real world problem, and are improved upon during the duration of the experiment. For this improvement to occur, data is collected a little differently than from an experimental project. Instead of taking all the data at once, like you would in an experimental experiment, you test your first design with multiple dependent variables. After that data is retrieved and analyzed, you modify your design using the design criteria, which are different aspects of your design that can be tweaked. You repeat this process over several iterations. After your final design is tested, you analyze the data and draw conclusions, like how you would at the end of an experimental project. The distinction between design and experimental project tends to get a little confusing. So here's an example of a design project. Let's say that we are trying to make the most sturdy writing utensil possible. We start off the introduction differently by talking about the problem we are solving. In this case, it would be that pencils aren't durable enough. Our first design could be a regular pencil. We could measure its chipping resistance, its permeability, and its drop resistance as our dependent variables. Then, for our future designs, we can change our design criteria, which could be something like size, material, and texturing. We make multiple changes to the pencil over multiple design iterations, continuing to follow the engineering design process. And by the end, we are left with an improved design over the first design, which we will analyze and draw conclusions for. Next, I would like to point out the main similarities and differences between experimental and design projects. Both of these kinds of projects involve background research, collecting and analyzing data, and drawing conclusions. Experimental projects have hypotheses, independent variables, and typically one dependent variable, while design projects have real world problems, designs, design criteria, and typically multiple dependent variables. Lastly, let's touch on the IJAS specific requirements. As mentioned, you must define your real world problem, do background research, and establish your design criteria and multiple dependent variables. After all of that, you should design your prototype and create and state your system for improving your design, which is typically done through a flowchart. This is a standard framework for most design flowcharts, the one seen on the bottom right. Basically, we start off with, after we have our prototype, we feed it into whatever test we are doing for the experiment. Then, using our dependent variables and design criteria, we evaluate whether the design was satisfactory in its accomplishments. If it was, we proceed with the new design and improve upon it from there. If not, we proceed with the prior design and improve upon it from there. After this has been established, test the design and improve the design by following the procedure outlined earlier in the experiment. After all testing and redesigning has been completed, report the final results. I hope now that you better understand what a design project is. If you want to learn more in detail about the experimental projects and design projects, refer to the resources on the IJAS website, shown in the link below. especially the IJES Policy and Procedure Manual. If you have any more questions that isn't answered in this video or on the website, feel free to email the IJAS Student Board with any questions, which is studentboardijAS@gmail.com. Thank you for watching.